In Chile, truckers' unions strike for better working conditions and a cap on fuel prices. Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel Bermúdez met with the Vice President of the Security Council of the Russian Federation, Dmitry Medvedev, in Moscow. An incident between vessels from China and the Philippines sparks tensions between the two nations in the South China Sea. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. In Chile on Monday, truckers' unions strike for better working conditions and a cap on fuel prices. The groups announced that they will strike until obtaining an audience with the government at the presidential headquarters. The walkout was initially announced only for the truckers of the northern zone of the country, but this Monday, organizations from other sectors of central and southern Chile also joined. They also denounced a lack of safety and excessive increases in fuel prices. So far, the truckers are on the roads preventing the passage of all the cargo trucks, but leaving free passage to emergency vehicles, private cars, and passenger transport. The Colombian Attorney General's office suspended on Friday the arrest warrants issued against the negotiators appointed by the ELN for the peace talks. Delegations from the government of Colombia and the National Liberation Army, the ELN, arrived in Caracas to set up a dialogue table. In this way, the parties will restart the peace negotiations process suspended in 2018 by the then Colombian President Iván Duque. Former M19 guerrilla Ori Patiño will lead the government's negotiating team, and on the other hand, Israel Ramirez will lead the ELN delegation. The dialogue process with the ELN was unblocked with the arrival to the Colombian presidency of Gustavo Petro in August. Since then, both parties have maintained contacts to resume their peace talks, which will have Venezuela, Cuba, and Norway as guarantor countries. In Colombia, authorities reported a confrontation between illegal armed gangs that left at least 18 dead in the department of Putumayo in the southwest of the country. The Human Rights Network of the Putumayo Peasantry joined the complaint, which stated that communicate illegal armed groups had a dispute in the rural area in the sector of José María Hernández in the municipality of Puerto Guzmán. The confrontation, in addition to the deaths, caused the forced displacement of some 30 families to the town of José María Hernández. In view of these disputes between illegal gangs, which take place in the midst of the civilian population, the network demanded the presence of the state to comply with the mechanisms of verification, prevention, and protection of the former families at high risk. In Argentina, tributes to the president of the Mothers of Plaza de Mayo, Eve de Bonafini, continue after her death at the age of 93. Political leaders and human rights defenders remember the figure of the late president of the Mothers of Plaza de Mayo, highlighting her unwavering commitment in the struggle for memory, truth, and justice. Hundreds of citizens rallied to the Plaza de Mayo in spite of the rainy weather to pay her tribute. Meanwhile, the Mothers of Plaza de Mayo found in line and their support group affirmed that they will continue with their struggle against the forced disappearance of those immediately and indirectly responsible, considering this as the best tribute they can pay to her. A few thousand Brazilians gathered at the 19th edition of the March for Black Awareness Day that took place on the main avenue of Sao Paulo. Many of them expressed a desire for racial issues to be among the primary concerns of the future government of President-elect Luis Inácio Lula da Silva.
Jair Bolsonaro doesn't even know what black people are. His government didn't even have black people. I saw it on television. There were no black people. With President-elect Luis Inácio Lula da Silva, not only racial issues are going to be important, but also indigenous issues. Now we will have real space, and it will be recognized. Not just anyone will be able to take it away from us.
In the United States, Democratic senators are eager to finalize an immigration reform before 2023. For a week, Democratic Party leaders have been pushing to establish legislation to help the undocumented population known as the Dreamers before the Republican Party takes over the U.S. House of Representatives. However, media reports indicate that the initiative depends on the approval of Republican representatives in the Senate, and despite meetings and phone calls, they have shown little interest in the Democrats' proposal. In this regard, Republican Senator Marco Rubio said Democrats are pushing the reform to please some activist groups. We'll take a short break, but first, remember you can follow us on our TikTok account at TeleSUR English, in which you will be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and more. Other stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel Bermúdez's international tour progresses. On Monday, the president met with the Vice President of the Security Council of the Russian Federation, Dmitry Medvedev. Both leaders agreed on the importance of relations between Havana and Moscow. Medvedev stressed that the round of consultations between Moscow and Havana showed the ties of friendship in the face of strong sanctions faced by both nations. Earlier, the Cuban president carried out a series of commemorative activities, visits and interviews, as well as meetings with politicians, businesspersons, and high-ranking officials. He also responded to President Putin's invitation to inaugurate the monument erected to the memory of the historical leader of the Cuban Revolution, Fidel Castro Ruz. Also on Monday, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Hua Chunying confirmed that Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel will visit her country from November 24th to 26th. As part of an international tour that also includes Algeria, Russia, and Turkey, Díaz-Canel will arrive in Beijing at the invitation of President Xi Jinping, with whom he is expected to hold talks that will renew the bilateral cooperation and friendship between Cuba and China. The Cuban leader will be the first Latin American president to arrive in this Asian country after the celebration of the 20th Congress of the Communist Party of China in October. Hua also recalled that Cuba and China have maintained cordial diplomatic relations for the past 62 years, supporting each other in the development of their economies. Russia and Nicaragua agreed to enhance cooperation in the field of civil aviation. These agreements are the result of a meeting between the head of the Russian Air Transport Agency Rosaviatsia, Alexander Neradko, and the Minister of Transport and Infrastructure of Nicaragua, Oscar Mojica Obregón, during which they discussed the issue. The agreements focus mainly on the modernization of Nicaraguan airports, which are expected to be used for passenger and cargo transportation. For his part, Neradko spoke about the organizational system for managing Russia's airport infrastructure and highlighted the issue of organizing the construction and reconstruction of airfield infrastructure facilities. In Russia, a fire killed 7 people on Sunday night in a warehouse in the downtown Moscow, as confirmed by the emergency services to the local press. The fire started at 6:20 p.m. local time in a 2,500 square meter brick warehouse on Komsomolskaya Square, which houses 3 railway terminals. According to the investigation committee, the fire may have been caused by improper storage of goods and the violation of fire safety regulations. The agency opened an investigation to clarify the circumstances. Firefighters were able to completely extinguish the fire by midnight, involving more than 120 people, more than 40 vehicles, 3 helicopters, and 2 fire trains. In Kazakhstan, the results of the preliminary count on the early presidential elections give 81.31% to Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, and the incumbent has been re-elected for a new term. Due to the reform approved this year, the new mandate will be extended for 7 years. Kassym-Jomart Tokayev wins 81.31% of the votes, announced the head of the Central Election Commission, Nurlan Abdirov, on Monday. The turnout at the polls exceeded 69.44%, and the blank vote in this Sunday's elections accounted for 5.80% of the total. Meanwhile, in their opinion, the observers of the Community of Independent States, the CIS, did not detect any irregularities in the preparation of these elections and in the course of the election day. On Sunday, participants in the Great Ethiopian Race shared the recent peace agreement with Tigray. According to local media, over 40,000 runners showed their joy and approval to the peace agreement between the Ethiopian government and Tigray rebels, expressing their hope that the race could be held in Mekelle, Tigray's capital. The runners also expressed their wish that where there is no peace, they can breathe serenity and go to run in the city of Mekelle. Meanwhile, Ethiopia's most famous long-distance runner and founder of the Great Ethiopian Race, Haile Gebrselassie, added that thanks to the peace, over 40,000 people can fulfill the dream of running in a peaceful environment. In Equatorial Guinea, the counting of the votes progresses after the closing of the polling stations, with the party of the president Teodoro Obiang on the lead, after about 22% of the polling stations have been counted. According to the first provisional results published by the government, 324 polling stations have been surveyed, equivalent to 67,196 votes. The Democratic Party of Equatorial Guinea, led by the current president, obtained 67,012 votes, which represents 99.72%. In second place is the opposition party Convergence for Social Democracy, which obtained 152 votes, 0.22%. On Sunday, the country held presidential elections scheduled for 2023, which came earlier to make them coincide with the legislative and municipal elections. The United Nations Organization, UN, condemned the recent attacks against Palestinians committed by Israeli settlers. The special envoy of the International Organization for the Middle East Peace Process, Tor Wennesland, assured that the violent acts could worsen an already tense environment. Wennesland warned Israel that everyone has the responsibility to act against extremists and to speak out against acts of violence and incitement in the region. This Saturday, a group of heavily armed Jewish settlers were escorted by militaries and attacked 2 mosques during a demonstration in the Arab neighborhood of Bab al-Zawiya. And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. In the South China Sea, an incident between vessels from China and the Philippines sparks tensions between the two countries on the eve of U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris' visit to the region. The incident took place on Sunday when Coast Guard vessels from both countries attempted to pick up an unidentified object drifting near Pagasa Island, a Philippine-occupied islet located about 290 nautical miles off the western coast of Palawan in the disputed Sportsley Archipelago. According to official sources, some explosions and artillery fire were heard after the incident. The naval incident comes ahead of Kamala Harris' visit to the island of Palawan, where she is scheduled to meet with members of the Philippine Coast Guard and local fishermen's associations on Tuesday. And the government of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea criticized United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres for his alleged alignment with the U.S. government. Democratic People's Republic of Korea's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Koe Song-hui, on Monday expressed her frustration with the biased attitude of the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, calling him a puppet of the United States. The diplomat's statements come after the Guterres strongly condemned the launch of an intercontinental ballistic missile by Pyongyang and called on the North Korean government to immediately refrain from such actions. According to Koe, the launch of the Hwasong 17 missile was legitimate and consistent with the exercise of the right to self-defense against the threat posed by the U.S. presence in the Korean peninsula. In Pakistan, activists hold a rally in Karachi to mark International Transgender Day of Remembrance. Hundreds of transgender rights activists rallied and marched to campaign for equal rights and raise awareness about discrimination against the community. The protest comes days after the local release of Joyland, a controversial Pakistani film about the affair of a married man with a transgender woman that was initially banned after complaints from conservative groups. International Transgender Day of Remembrance is celebrated on November 20th to honor victims who have been killed as a result of transphobia and violence against transgender people.
There was a momentum for acceptance of transgenders, but religious parties made this out as part of their political agenda just to gain seats, undermining the respect of our gender identity. As an activist, as a woman, as a human being, I believe we are all equal, no matter what our gender is, and we should get equal rights, which is something guaranteed by our Constitution.
Now we move on to other topics. In Indonesia, the death toll rises to 55 after a 5.6 magnitude earthquake that shook on Monday the province of West Java, the most populated island of the country with almost 50 million inhabitants. In addition, important damages in residences and infrastructures are reported. This was informed by the spokesperson of the government of Cianjur, the city closest to the epicenter of the quake. Meanwhile, the National Disaster Agency for Disaster Management, BNPB in Indonesian, confirms for the moment a total of 14 deaths and 17 injured due to the earthquake. The earthquake occurred at 1:21 p.m. local time, with the hypocenter at a depth of 10 kilometers and the epicenter at 16.7 kilometers from the locality of Cianjur. The Indonesian Agency of Meteorology, Climatology, and Geophysics put the magnitude of the earthquake at 5.6 and rule out the potential for a tsunami. Now we address other topics. In Syria, the government is promoting a vaccination campaign to immunize children under 5 years of age, especially those who have not been vaccinated because of the war. The campaign will check the vaccination status of some 2,700,000 infants in all the provinces. It is estimated that some 268,000 infants have not received any vaccines. Health authorities said that the list of shots for this immunization campaign includes polio, tuberculosis, tetanus, and hepatitis C. Before the armed conflict, Syria's health indicators were amongst the highest in the region, but the 2011 war caused them to decrease drastically, which led to the authorities to rescue this sector by rebuilding medical centers and launching vaccination campaigns. We have come to the end of this news brief, but remember you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.
In a world